URL, and I am 100% sure that my device has a browser. I'm just calling start activity. I'm sure there's an activity to respond to. But in reality, what you should do is what the slide contains, which is this if not null, then perform it. Because the simple truth is this request could fail. There might not be any browsers installed, or at least there may not be anything that can respond to this. So I know that's not the case, but the proper way is to do a intent resolution check first. All right, so what you do is an intent resolution check by doing view intent dot resolve activity get package manager, and if that's not equal to null, then start activity. Okay, so what does this application do? So once it launches, so this application is going to bring up a chooser. So it's launching this view action. Android sees the view action, sees the type of data, and figures out through its intent resolution process that there are multiple activities that can respond, activities/applications that can respond to this. There is Chrome. There is some browsers that I built from years ago, and then there's this test browser that comes with the emulator. So it gives the user the choice to pick which one. So I can say, okay, just go with Chrome. I can say just once or always to set Chrome as the default. I hit just once. So those are 3 browsers, right? And here is the comic that I was loading, 2223. So that's great. But let's say, apparently the guy's name is Randall, who creates this comic. So let's say Randall hired us to write a comic viewing application, which we kind of did. But Randall wants to go further. Because this application is installed, the client doesn't just want the app to show a comic. What he'd like is whenever the user is trying to view one of his comics, he wants this application to launch. So he doesn't want the browser to open, he wants his app to open, or at least for the user to have the choice to open the app. So you would have seen this numerous times. If you try to open a Facebook link in an email or a web browser, you might notice that the Facebook application opens automatically, or it asks you. Same with Instagram, same with all of these other big name apps. Basically what they do is they have, if it's an Android and iOS has something similar, it declares a filter that says, hey, if somebody's trying to access this information, this URI, this whatever, consider me as a candidate. I'm the official app for this service, so a browser can handle it, sure, but I can also handle it. So let's modify this application so that it can respond to requests to view XKCD comics. So we'll put this aside. We're done with this app. Its job is just to generate the request. So in our app, we need to do a couple of things. First, we have to go to our manifest, and we have to specify a filter. So this activity, our main activity, has a filter for its launcher-ness. We're gonna add another filter. So we're gonna add a filter that will include all the elements that are necessary for it to respond to a certain request. So, first thing I'll add is the action. The action that I want to respond to is the view action. So that'll put me through the first test when the user clicks that button to view the comic. The second element I want to add is the data element. Now, the data element is going to require different fields. Here you can see all the fields available to me: host, MIME type, path, pattern. So I guess in this case, I don't know if it's a regular expression or what it will take. Prefix, port, scheme, etc., etc., etc. All the things that I can break it down. So host for me is simple. It's xkcd.com. I don't know. Maybe. I feel like that's it. But I need some other information. So that's the host I want to look for. The scheme I want is HTTPS. So I have the host, I have the scheme. I can add other elements, but the more elements I add, the more specific it becomes. This is as specific as I want it. If you do HTTPS for XK, which is the URL that it will use, I believe, I could add another data element for HTTP. But I'll just do this for now. And then I'm going to need to add not one, but two categories. Because the goal of this intent filter is to capture implicit intents, I need to have the default category, because that's going to be added to the request by default. And then finally, I hope that takes the red away, I need to add the second category, browsable. Yay. Browsable is a category for activities that are able to respond to links in other apps. So this is what allows this to respond if you click a link on a website or in an email. They're a little different than just your arbitrary explicit intents, that implicit intents rather, that get fired when I'm clicking a button. So this intent filter is telling Android, this activity, main activity, can respond to any request to xkcd on HTTPS. Or I don't know, HTTP. Any view request. So that's the first bit. The second bit is, okay, a request is made and your activity is launched or selected as the candidate. I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to create an instance of your activity and then I'm going to hand you the intent. What do I do with the intent now that I have it? Well, now I need to be mindful that my activity can be launched in two ways. It could be launched when the user clicks the icon in the home screen, or it could be launched because an implicit intent was launched or was created and I'm responding to it. So in the latter case, there is going to be an intent here with the action is that wrong or something? Oh, no, I'm not in a, I need to be in a method. Come on, guys. Well, that should be here. So then I'm going to be inside of, I'm going to get an intent. If I was launched via an implicit intent, then this intent is going to contain an action. Which action? An action equal to intent.action view. So if this is true, then I want to change my behavior slightly. Now, this might throw, as I've written my code, this might throw a null pointer exception. Why? Because if the user launched my activity by clicking it in on the home screen, this is null. So I'll be calling equals on a null reference, and the whole thing gets thrown. So who here has heard of Yoda notation? Learn it today, you will. So Yoda notation basically means, despite how intuitively we might think, I want to see if the data I have is equal to something, Yoda notation says, take the thing you know. So I know this is there, and use that to call equals, or whatever else I need to call. So intent.action view is a string literal. So this will always be present. I'm not concerned with a null pointer exception happening here. So I can call equals on that, and if this is null, it doesn't matter. You can call equals. You can pass null as an argument to equals. It just says no, I'm not equal to null. So this works just fine. Not sure why this is still complaining. Oh, we're getting to that. Oh, not get data. I'm sorry, get action. My fault. Here we go. So I'll get the action, not get data, get the action, and see if it's if the action of the intent is action view. That means I was launched via the implicit intent. So what I would like to do here is I'm going to get just something. Let's see. I'm going to get the code for the comic. So the code for the comic is going to be inside the URL, the URI of the intent. Specifically, it's going to be the path. This is how XKCD comics are structured. xkcd.com / the code. If it was different, if it was a different structure, I would need to change how I'm parsing it. But that's how this particular website's codes are done. So if you're trying to visit xkcd.com / 2223, I'm going to take that 2223 and store that. And then in my code here, I'm going to modify it. So this is the URL to get today's comic, whatever the current comic is. So whatever. And this is the URL format to get any comic. So you take, it's xkcd.com / the code / the remainder. So whatever else is. That'll give me the JSON string for any comic I want. So then I'll come back here and I'll modify this. I'm doing it all hand-fisted, you know. If code is equal to null, then that's the URL object I want. Otherwise, this looks terrible. All right. At the very least, we could try some ternary, right? So I could say URL is equal to code equals null. Yes. Then new URL. Otherwise, you all know the ternary operator? Who here does not know the ternary operator? It's like a fancy if-then. Not that fancy. It's an if-then. So you assign, so this URL will get, depending on the result of this question, either this, if it's true, or this if it's false. And this time is going to be so I'm just creating this larger thing. So if code is equal to null, do this, otherwise do this. For sure, get even fancier by putting the ternary somewhere right in the middle here, but that just mess it up. So this is just a fancy if then. All right, so it means when I install it, I should get first today's comic, or it'll crash. One of those two things will definitely happen. All right, so that's today's comic. Remember with the words. And I'll exit that, and I'll go back to my comic viewer app. So this is the one that had the link for me to view the comic. So now when I click the link, again I get a list, but now added to the list is JSON parser. That's the app that we've been working on. The browsers are here. It doesn't matter where this is in the list, FYI. It's just because I had selected it earlier. But now this becomes an option for me because this application has an activity that has an intent filter that matches the request that this view application had just created. So now I select this and I hit just once, and hopefully we get comic 2223. There it is. I think let's say 2223 here, but that means this should have changed. So I pulled in this new comic based on the request made in a different application. So this application can now receive requests for XKCD viewing and respond accordingly. So very specific, but nonetheless, it's delegation. All right, any questions on implicit intents?
You made a new intent filter. Was that just so you could tell where the intent came from in the main activity? Is there a reason not to put all the views and all the actions in one intent filter, all the actions in category?
Here?
Yeah.
Is there a reason to not? So it comes down to the tests. So yes, there's a reason. So this intent filter, I don't like talking about this one because it's default, but so this intent filter is here because it's saying this activity is the main activity that should be my launcher. If I were to put anything else in here, then the rules about who has to match come into play. So it means that if I put this browsable in here, then if the request to see which activity is the main activity comes in and it doesn't have a browsable, if the intent doesn't have a browsable category added, then this won't be considered. So now I wouldn't have a main. At least that's the theory. Let's try it out. So it has to do with the tests, basically. So yeah, if I put all filters into all actions and data and categories into one filter, then the filter becomes too specific and it may skip. The activity may be skipped when whoever is making the request wants it. So, this might still work. Let's see what the rules were.
Has the second one. He's saying if you moved them all up there and didn't have the second.
Didn't have which second one? Yeah, right. No, right. I was trying to see if I could break it with this, but I'm trying to think of it. So the rule says if you match all the categories in the intent, so this will actually still work probably.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it's because in the main activity you wouldn't know why you were launched.
So my concern is if I put 2 million in here, the activity may not be launched at all.
Okay.
That's my concern. So I'm gonna try something now and see. I'm trying to not have a default anymore by essentially eliminating it. All right. So we run here, which is kind of indicative of the fact that it's working. One more time. Right, so I'm gonna try something now. Okay, so tell me where J's are supposed to be.
Towards the middle. What? Between G and, or the
Seems right.
H and
Yeah,
G.
G. Okay, so it did work. So it worked in that we broke it. So the request that goes in to check, hey, which of your activities should be displayed in the launcher no longer match. So I don't have a way to launch that activity anymore. I have to magically do it with ADB or something. So that's generally the reason. You want to make sure that your intent filters are for a specific thing so that you don't run into a problem like this where the matching breaks and something doesn't go where it's supposed to go. Now, I don't know which one of those just broke. I think it's the data, but definitely one of them broke it. Any other questions? Please start your labs. Please. What's that?
We did, but
You sure?
yeah.
I don't get any questions.
No,
That worries me.
slow going.
I know for a fact there are questions to be asked, so, yes.
This is kind of a silly question, but maybe it's not, but.
I'll let you know.
Okay, no, I think I know the answer, but like, so the text view, like when I did it last time for the last one, the text view would basically match the parent, but that's not normally how it works. You can kind of make
Text
it.
view matches the parent. Oh, meaning the text view is the,
It's like the whole box for the fragment.
okay.
Which that's like kind of a problem for this one, obviously, because you need to have different ones, right?
Right, okay. So the question is, the position is, in previous labs, you've seen me just have a single element in the layout of a fragments layout file. And therefore, when it is inflated in the fragments on create view, I just cast it as the object type that it is. Yeah, so that only works if your fragment has only a single view. If it doesn't, then you're back to the original, which is the view itself. The view needs to be a layout, so what you get back is a layout, and then on that layout object you will call find view by ID. It's the same thing here. That's not just a fragment issue. Like I could, in theory, have an activity. I could have an activity whose layout file rather, instead of containing a layout object, just contains one thing. I could say this is a button. Yeah. So I can say this whole deal is to be one big button.
Essentially, that's how I did my list.
Yeah, so yeah, you saw two fragments, and then in the activity, now when I call after we call set content view to this, the layout is just a button. So calling find view by ID doesn't have any more meaning because if there's no view hierarchy for it to dive in. Yeah, the button doesn't contain anything else. I'm just on a button now.
And I have another question. So you said you do a query in the start. So like that's just to like populate the list of.
So the user sees something when it starts up. Yeah.
Right. And you can just write any kind of like function that'll.
You should segment your code into you mean methods?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, you should segment your code into methods.
Okay.
Just as a general rule. What did I break?
It just when we read the query, we thought maybe it was like some kind of like outside tool object that we had to look at.
No, yeah, so it's just a simple URL, and sometimes URL has a search key at the end, other times it doesn't. If it doesn't have a search key, you get the whole thing back. If it does have a search key, you get like a reduced set. And then you just start converting that to an array list of book objects. Which means you first have to convert that object into an array, into a JSON array.
So yeah, so we make the books into JSON. I think that we use JSON to make
take the request, take the response, turn it into a JSON array. Now you have a JSON array, loop through, pulling out JSON objects, take each of those objects and turn it into a book.
Right.
For bonus points, not really me giving you bonus points, but just for that feel good feeling. You could just have your book object have a constructor that takes a JSON object. and then have it break it down. So there's that version of the world.
So you'll have two threads, one for the search query, or to run the search query, and one to get the initial.
You don't have to. Because what's the difference in those two actions? None.
Yeah.
One just gets run at startup and one gets run when you click a button. So if properly structured, there should only one code base that does that query. And once it gets called from uncreate another, or your whichever lifecycle method you use, another time it gets called from a buttons unclick listener.
Gotcha.
So it should be the same. Just some check to see, oh, is there a query string, yes or no? That all that does is change what the URL looks like, but everything else is functionally the same. All right. Good luck. Hopefully get some stuff done over the weekend. On Tuesday, we'll start talking about services.